Hello, Sherry.
Hi, George.
We are back for another episode of Wednesdays with Sherry and George.
Yep, our weekly show where we talk about the music we've been making the last week and give you a little behind the scenes of what's going on, why we created those pieces, and how we created those pieces.
So let's review what we've done so far, and then we can talk about today. We've tried a number of different styles, different genres, different instrumentation. They range everything from what might be music for corporate videos, both sort of a chill electronic feel, an acoustic feel, a very funky piece that we played, that could be for like a heist movie. We
Suspense
cue, a piece that could be for an advertisement for babies. That was kind of a lullaby.
Piano ones,
New
age one.
Very simple piano, new age pieces. And today, what we have is a piece that was a little bit of a challenge for us. It was a listing on taximusic.com, to try to create a Disney composition. And of course, Disney is very famous for creating some very classical pieces that are now, part of every musician's portfolio. Now, one of the things that Disney does is classical symphony orchestra arrangement. That's kind of what we tried to do today.
So let's talk a little bit about what the process was like to create the piece.
For me, and I don't know about for you, but when I'm thinking about a piece that's going to be orchestrated, I usually just start with the piano. Mm-hmm. And I try to create a piece that has a beginning and an end, and it's got a transition in the middle, so it can be an A format or something of that nature. And I want to be able to play it. It's got to be cohesive and coherent as a composition on piano. How about you?
Yeah, I think that makes it easier. It's easier to build the layers.
Yeah, and then so what I do once I've got that, and I record that in MIDI. So I've got all the notes right there. Of course, I edit that a little bit to ensure that the timing is right, the phrasing's right, and all of that. Then I basically just start deconstructing it. Now, the beauty with MIDI is that from that moment on, you will spend about 90% of your time dragging and dropping.
Copy and paste.
It's very tedious, quite frankly.
Hey, at least it's not tape.
But it's not tape. The capabilities for sampled sounds have come along so far in the last few years.
Yeah, and it's interesting, in this piece, a lot of the instruments were Logic, right?
A lot were Logic. One of the things we've learned about trying to assimilate an orchestra is that in a live orchestra, if you have a violin section as an example, that string section in one passage might go from arco to legato to staccato to pizzicato, back to legato, all in a few measures.
Yeah.
And to do that on a keyboard is not very easy because you need to actually set up maybe 5 or 7 different tracks to do each one of those articulations. So it's a little bit of a challenge, and again, it goes back to the point about copy and paste and really just working on editing that passage to make it sound as lifelike as possible.
Yeah, and it takes some trial and error because you can hear it in your head, but then how do you do that?
Yeah.
You have to go and move the notes around and try it, and sometimes you think you know what to do and then you do it and it still doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
It's very tedious, but we've learned that when it doesn't sound right, it's not the library, it's us.
Yeah, that's a good point. It really is. The libraries are pretty darn perfect in terms of the quality of the sound, and they allow you a lot of different variations on the reverb and the placement of the instrument. There's different microphones, and so all of that gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of how you want that instrument to sound. But it really comes down to trying to, again, approximate what that passage would sound like if it were played live by a violin section or an oboe or an individual clarinet. It's not as easy to do as just playing that passage.
A couple things that I've learned editing these is, number one, sometimes the velocity makes a huge difference in what the tone sounds like, and just fixing that can make quite a big difference. The second thing that I've learned about using virtual instruments is sometimes the library will allow you to play in a range that's outside of the instrument's normal range. And if you don't know the instrument, you might end up playing there and it will sound weird.
Yeah, so that is true for most of the logic libraries.
Yeah.
Now, the play libraries that we also use, which comes from East West,
those ones, they limit you.
They limit you. They limit you to the exact range of that instrument, which is very helpful.
Yeah, but even then, when you're within the range, sometimes you'll play a passage and you feel like it doesn't quite work. You can try moving it up or down based, like if it's a cello, I'd probably move it down. If it's a violin, I'd probably move it up. And sometimes that fixes it.
Yeah, it's true.
So, 2 tricks we learned.
Another part of the assignment was stick to a single motif, which is what you'll hear in this particular piece that you would hear ordinarily in Disney. And again, you hear that sort of classic symphony orchestration that is so typical of Disney movies.
Yeah, with a lot of swells and a lot of key changes.
Yeah, swells are very important. That's another thing. It's very difficult to achieve using just a MIDI tool. You really need to manually change the volume, and there's ways to do that with automation in Logic, but it's not very straightforward. And again, you really have to hear, you have to listen and think about what it might sound like, as opposed to just looking at what it looks like on the screen and saying, oh, I want to increase the volume here to swell and have a crescendo at a certain point. It doesn't always work that way, just because of the way the instrument might be attacking that particular note. So we hope you enjoy the piece, and again, we'll continue to share what we are learning as we go along in creating these pieces.
Yeah, and if you have any tips on how we can improve with our virtual instruments, if you have experience with them, let us know in the comments.
Absolutely.
And let us know what you think in the comments. Also click subscribe.
And thanks for watching.
See you next week.